So, today we will be looking at the guilds, which is a very complicated topic, overall quite obscure. One of the most obscure topics in this mod. And I'll try to clarify what do the guilds do and how can you trigger them. So we will start with the Stonemasons Guild and the Merchants and Explorers Guilds, and we'll do the rest of the guilds in another episode, in another tutorial. So there are several types of guilds. I'll start perhaps with what is the most interesting of them, the Stonemasons Guild. That has changed quite a bit in my Invita submod. Let's find a settlement that has a Stonemasons Guild. Where do we have the Stonemasons Guild? Not Minster, not Paderborn. Bonn might have it. I don't think so. I think Köln might have it. Okay, we even have the one level up here. So here we have the Steinmetz Bruderschaft, which is the level 2 of the Stonemasons Guild. Okay, that also gives a public order bonus. Interesting. It's all in German. Okay, so let's find then the level 1. Level 1 should be in English. So I still haven't finished then with my translations of the German text into English. Okay, would this one have the Stonemasons Guild? Good, so this one is the level 1, the Dombauhütte. What does that mean? Dome is a cathedral. The cathedral construction hut. This is really the stonemasons in German. Cathedral workshop. There you go. Goodness me, I still have to fix the translations. So there's future in my Invita submod. Okay, so let's discuss the Stonemasons Guild. So a public order bonus increases happiness by 5%, but that's not all it does. But let's first discuss it, because that's the most interesting guild, perhaps, in the game. So, in the base game, the Masons Guild is triggered by building church-type buildings and results in discounts in building further church buildings, for example, in building abbeys or cathedrals. So, you start with a low-level church buildings. If you get the Stonemasons Guild, then you get discounts in building the higher level church buildings. So is it worthwhile? Because you can imagine it's going to cost you a couple of thousand to commission the guild, and then you get a bit of a discount for building cathedrals, for example. So it wasn't really that worthwhile in the base game. It seemed pointless almost to commission the guild because you have to spend a lot of money to actually get it in the first place. So I decided to change this a little bit and decrease the cost of the guild and commissioning the guild, and then increase the benefits. And my logic behind this was the following. Masons, stonemasons, were in previous centuries, prior to the 17th century, tasked with the building of religious edifices. So that was their main task. They would build churches and cathedrals. However, during this period, in the 17th century, the situation had begun to change already. Although stonemasons remained important in construction of religious edifices using traditional Gothic techniques, the master mason's role began to shift toward that of a contractor rather than solely an architect of religious buildings. So the chief mason was no longer simply the architect of a cathedral, let's say. Now he became more of a contractor who would take on other types of work apart from cathedral building. So the specialized skill of stonemasons in cutting and shaping stone was indispensable for creating robust, prestigious structures that defined the Renaissance era onward, the Baroque era, and so on. So the key impacts of 17th century stonemasons were in the following areas. First of all, there was a classical revival and refinement in architecture. 17th century Masons played a crucial role in shifting from Gothic to classical styles, so adopting the Renaissance and eventually the Baroque styles, heavily utilizing limestone and marble to create refined and decorative structures modeled after Greek and Roman prototypes or ideals. There were technological advancements and improvements in structural integrity. So that was another type of advancement or an impact they had in construction of public buildings. So Masons developed sophisticated, refined techniques to improve structural stability, including advanced keystones for arches that allowed for more even weight distribution. There was specialization in aisler masonry, so called bunker masons, who were skilled stone cutters, focused on creating precise, dressed ashlar facades, enhancing both structural strength and aesthetic appeal, with stones often carved and shaped off-site at quarries before transport. Masons adapted to using new materials such as brick and terracotta for intricate patterns, and in addition to using stone. Another technological advancement was aiming to achieve enduring structural quality. That's besides cathedrals. So, despite the rise of new methods, the 17th century masonry retained a focus on longevity, utilizing lime mortar for creating structures meant to withstand centuries. So, cathedrals did not always use mortar, but from this period onward, lime mortar became more common. There was an evolution also of professional status. So while medieval masons often acted as architect builders, the 17th century saw the master mason as a highly skilled contractor. 17th century stonemasonry was a blend of established tradition from previous centuries and innovation, ensuring that stone remained the material of choice for prestige, durability, and artistic expression. Bridges, schools, universities, libraries, law courts, and other government buildings were made of stone, not just churches. So, consequently, with Invitas submod, the Stonemasons Guild provides lower cost construction of other types of buildings in addition to religious buildings. These include marketplaces, schools, gymnasiums and universities, public baths, the administrative series of buildings, and harbors. So you get also discounts to those with Invita. There are two levels of the guild. The first level gives a 20% discount to construction in the settlement with the guild, while the second level gives faction wide discounts of 20% and local discounts of 30%. The idea behind the high percentages of these modifiers is that the guild should be cost effective to commission in the long term. So the high level guild costs 5,000 florins to commission, if I'm not mistaken. And the first level guild, the Domba Hute, costs, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 florins. So keep changing that. And so you need to get that investment back. Otherwise, there's no point in building it. You need to get your investment of 2,000, 3,000 florins back after you build up your settlement. So you have to get a reasonably high discount modifier from the building. So that's why I have given it 20% and 30% construction discount modifiers. Now, if you think this is too high, I'm open to criticism. The modifiers can be potentially reduced. I would be happy for feedback. In the long term, it depends when you build it. If you build it early on, and if you can get Stonemason's second level, the Steinmetz Bruderschaft, I think it was, then maybe it's worthwhile to have lower discounts. But otherwise, it's borderline. If the discount for construction was 10%, it's possibly not worth it. So that covers the Stonemasons Guild. And I feel that is the one that's perhaps the most interesting and the most generally useful, perhaps one you might want to have in several settlements. Of the other guilds, the next one might be the Explorers Guild. So let's find one that's also an interesting guild. Let's find an Explorers Guild somewhere. Where do I have one that's not very high level? Somewhere here. This is a level 2 here. The East India Company. Increasing tradable goods, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is it's down here at the bottom, increases the probability of the ancillary explorer or intrepid explorer. So that's perhaps the more interesting aspect of having this guild. And the lower level guild is the West India Company, of which I think I have one here. That has a trade bonus of 1. So the West India is the low-level guild, the first level, with a trade bonus of 1, increases the probability of ancillary intrepid explorer by 10%. So you have a 10% chance per game turn for a general who spends all his time in that settlement for that game turn to get the ancillary. Whereas in Munster, we have the higher level, the East India Company, that gives a trade bonus of 2, and it has a 15% chance of increasing your general's chances for getting the Intrepid Explorer ancillary. That's 15% chance per game turn. You have to keep your general in the settlement for the entire duration of the game turn. He must not move. So you can see probably here, I have several generals inside. These are relatively newly recruited generals that don't have the ancillary. But in the other settlements, I have mostly generals that already have the Intrepid Explorer ancillary. Not him. Okay. The Intrepid Explorer ancillary, which gives 15% to movement points plus 1% to line of sight. So that's quite a useful ancillary to have. And probably most of my generals, okay, he has it. Most of my generals do have it by now, Intrepid Explorer. So they've all been trained at Minster. Okay, he doesn't. He does. So some generals that have other important traits, such as the Brilliant Scribe, the Librarian, or Inventor ancillaries, these are good as governors. If they are dedicated governors, then I don't care about them getting the ancillary. I'm going to keep them in the settlement. They're not going to do much else. They're just going to be governors. But other generals that have to move around and go to other settlements, lead armies, fight battles, it is good to have this type of ancillary. So a lot of the other generals that are in the minor towns, the minor settlements, or have traveled some distance from Münster, have this ancillary. You can see that a lot of them have it. So that's the idea. This guild, the Explorers Guild, is triggered by recruiting merchants, building ports and port-related buildings such as docks, wharfs, warehouses, and the like, which is possible in coastal settlements. These are the warehouses and things, and by sending admirals to journeys far away from your capital. So, as an example, I have the capital here at the moment. I think it's Paderborn. I think it's, where would it be? Would it be Paderborn? I think it's here, I'm not sure. Is that colon city, colon capital, Machete? So this is the capital at the moment, Machete. So early in the campaign, in order to get the guild, I sent some captains out here, out at sea. I have recalled them because I don't need them anymore, but I had sent captains around the world to distant travels, and this helped trigger this guild. Okay, so that is one thing you can do. I forgot to mention perhaps how you get the Mason Stone, the Stonemasons, the Masons Guild, it does say that. The Stonemasons Guild can be triggered mainly by the construction of religious buildings, but to a lesser extent also by the construction of most other types of buildings. So have that in mind. But building religious buildings helps trigger the Stonemasons Guild. On the other hand, as I said, for the Explorers Guild, you need either to send admirals to journeys far away from your capital, or build ports and port-related buildings, or you can trigger it to some extent by recruiting merchants, to a lesser extent. Talking about merchants, the next guild is the Merchants Guild. I think I only have one or two places where I have a Merchants Guild, because at this point the merchants get 0% income. Okay, that's a bad example. Let's load another month because we're in September and I think I had a bad harvest, bad vintage, and bandits, robbers, and thieves, and various bad events that have caused trade to go down to 0. Let's load another save. Let's go to another month. This was August. Let's try June before these things kick in, the bad harvest and bad vintage. So let's have a look. So still 0. Okay. Here we are. Okay, let's go even further back. Sorry, April. So we have some merchant trade in April. Okay, so we have a little bit of trade in April. I think I took hold of some new settlements very recently that were undeveloped by the AI, and so trade went down to 0. But you can see here the trade, even in April after the trade fair or during the trade fair event, the income from the merchants is not great. So here, how many stars? Here's a ton of stars. 7, and he only makes 49 florins per turn. Here's a 6th level merchant. He makes 58 florins per turn. There's a different type of whatever, different type of area, different type of resource, makes 72 per turn. With the 9 level merchant, there are a few who are in more valuable resources, like these ones out here, the very high level merchants. They make a little bit more, 225 per turn. The total income from merchant trade is about 5,000 florins. And I have a ton of merchants. Let's have a look how many. So they start here. You can see they're also fairly high level. They start here, and that's about 5,000 and maybe another 5, 10, maybe another 5, 15, another 5, 20, 25, let's say 30, let's say 35, let's say 40, 45. About 45 merchants, and between them approximately, just roughly, about 40 to 45. Between them, they make 5,000 florins. So on average, they make about, 100 florins each merchant on average per turn in April. Now, is it worth recruiting all those merchants? Each one of them costs 550 to recruit. And then getting the Merchants Guild. The economy is very tight in this mode, so you have to make that decision. For this reason, I've only built one Merchants Guild, and I get basically all my merchants. Once I have this guild, I get them all from this guild, pretty much all of them. Sorry, why doesn't it work? And yes, here we have in Goslar the highest level. So the distance trade guild, this is the second level merchants guild. So that's the master merchants level guild, the second level. And this gives increased tradable goods, an increase in tradable goods. So does the first level. The first level gives a trade bonus of 1. But the second level, this one, gives a trade bonus of 2. And the increase in tradable goods. In addition, it has 100% chance of adding 1 level of experience to a new merchant hired in this settlement here in Goslar. But only the Distance Trade Guild, only the Master Merchants Guild, the second level, gives an experience bonus to merchants recruited. The first level does not add any experience to a merchant. All it gives is a bonus to trade for 5,000 florins. It can be triggered by recruiting merchants anywhere or in the settlement, and by building mercantile buildings in the settlement, such as the market line of buildings or various types of port buildings. But in this settlement, we cannot get that many different port buildings. It's easier to get this guild in a coastal settlement somewhere in the North Sea or the Baltic, where you have more options for port buildings. The Merchants Guild can also be triggered by successful missions from the Merchants Guild. So sometimes you get a mission from the Merchants Guild to acquire a merchant. Now, the mission is an assassination, but sometimes you get Merchants Guild missions to go and acquire an enemy merchant. And then if you are successful, that also helps in triggering a Merchants Guild. But I don't think this guild is terribly useful, and so I only have commissioned one, this one in Goslar. A similar guild is the Hanseatic Guild, but that's an even less useful guild in my opinion. It's a poor man's merchant guild that only has 1 level. It doesn't have a second level. The Hanseatic Guild gives a bonus trade of 1, like the first level of Merchants Guild, but nothing beyond that. That's all it does. So it is much like building a resource. Some of these resources you can build, let's say this one, Mint. Mint is not a good example. Let's see what resources can we build here. Nothing terribly useful, nothing here. Probably have built most of the useful resources. For example, salt works will give an increase in tradable goods. So that's a trade bonus of 1. It gives a couple of other things. Well, if you build a Hanseatic Guild, it will give you just this middle thing, increase in tradable goods, plus 1, nothing else. It will not give anything else, but it will cost just as much, 5,000 florins. However, you can build it in 1 game turn rather than in 6 game turns. So it has that advantage. Is it worth it? So for this one, you need 6 game turns to build it. So is it worth having it? Maybe you'd like to get the Stonemasons Guild instead. But if you offered it, you can make a decision. If you want it, you can keep it. The Hanseatic Guild can be triggered by capturing one of the Hanseatic League cities. These are Lübeck, Hamburg, Danzig, Bremen, and Rostock. And this is my first tutorial for the guilds. we still have some left. The alchemists, the swordsmiths guilds, and a few more. So I will do a separate tutorial for those, so I can keep this one relatively short. Thank you for listening.